So you start pricing out a Hawaii trip and it doesn't look too bad. Maybe you find a round trip flight from the West Coast for around $500, pretty good deal. Then you start to look at hotels and you add up the taxes, add up the resort fees, then the parking and the rental car, food, activities, and all those smaller costs. Suddenly that Hawaii trip you thought you might be able to get away with for about $5,000 to $6,000 is now closer to $8,000, $10,000, $12,000, maybe even more. So how much does a Hawaii trip really cost in 2026? Let's get into it. Aloha and welcome to Hawaii's Best. I'm Brian Murphy, Hawaii destination expert and your personal guide to planning an unforgettable trip to Hawaii. In this episode, I want to give you a realistic idea of what a Hawaii trip costs right now, today, July 2026. We're going to look through what it looks like traveling as a couple, families, flights, lodging, food, transportation, activities, taxes, and the differences between the different islands because that does matter. So your total will depend on where you're flying from, when you're going, like time of year, which island you're choosing, and how you like to travel, like, bougie, or are you okay with a little bit more of on the budget end? So by the end of this episode, you should have a much better, starting point in your planning. And I would rather give you a realistic number now than have you figure out halfway through your planning that the trip is going to, cost several $1,000s more than you expected. And by the way, throughout this episode, I am going to use a lot of numbers. I did a lot of research for this episode to give you some up-to-date numbers. And if your eyes start to glaze over, it's going to be okay. I don't do good with audio. I got to visualize it. I got to see it. And I just updated my free Hawaii trip calculator. You can find that in the link below in the show notes, or you can just go to hawaiisbesttravel.com/calculator. Right up front, I just want to give you some averages. So let's talk a little bit about if you're traveling as a couple, what a 7-night trip to Hawaii would look like for two adults. A realistic 2026 planning range for the island of Oahu is around $6,000 to $8,500. And for the Big Island, you're looking at between $6,500 to $9,500. On the island of Kauai, again, we're talking about just couples, it's around $7,000 to $10,000 or so. Again, this is for a full 7-night trip. And on the island of Maui, it's around $7,500 to $11,500. The reality check happens when you have like a family of 4. We're a family of 5, so it's we got to do a little bit more math. But let's go with a family of 4. I just did this for, and again, in that calculator, you can add in and how many people are going, grandma, grandpa, all that stuff. But for family 4, island of Oahu, looking at around, on average, around $8,500 to $12,500. The Big Island is about $9,500 to $14,000, so about $15,000. And on the island of Kauai, looking at $10,000 to about $15,500. And finally, on Maui, the most expensive, you probably already knew that, but if you didn't, now you know, it's going to be around $11,000 to $17,000 for Maui. That's a family of 4 again. Again, your mileage may vary, but it's giving you averages before we really dive into the nitty-gritty of what to expect and how to get a great estimate for your trip. And I get it, those numbers probably sound pretty high, but those are not necessarily like a luxury trip. Some of those on the higher end. This is really just like a regular airfare, flying coach, decent lodging, nothing like too sketchy. Transportation, meals, a few activities, taxes, tips, and some room for the costs. If you tend to forget, you got to go to Costco, or you want to go support local, go to that farmer's market. So you can absolutely, definitely spend less. And maybe you're using points. Maybe you're staying with family. Maybe you're cooking most of your meals in like we do. We stock up at Costco, and where we stay, we have a full kitchen, and we eat basically breakfasts and most lunches in, and we go out pretty much every night. We might do a dinner in once or twice in the week, but we usually save our outs for dinner. But for most couples, I would not begin planning a 1-week Hawaii trip with less than $6,000 unless you already know where those savings are going to come from. But, do not just choose a lower number because it feels better. Know why your trip is going to cost less. And one of those biggest changes in 2026 is that visitors are spending more money each day. Those are some of the headlines kind of floating out there. But really, I think the bigger story is not simply that more people are coming to Hawaii. Visitors are often taking shorter trips while spending more per day on lodging, food, transportation, activities. That is also why shorter trips does not always save as much money as people expect. Things are just more expensive now. But even a shorter trip, your airfare is still going to be the same. You still got to fly to the islands. You still got to get back home. You still need airport. You still may need to rent a car. Granted, it's shorter days. And shorter trips sometimes become more expensive per day because you're trying to, pack in more restaurants, more tours, more experiences in a lot less time. So let's get a little bit more in depth about just the flights, because that's one of the biggest questions a lot of people have. And for a round trip flight from the West Coast with, a lot of people do visit the islands like myself from the West Coast, I would generally budget around $450 to $700 per person. That's a pretty wide range. From the Midwest, you're looking at about $600, $650 to around $1,000. And then from the East Coast, obviously, you can see it's going to be a longer flight, $800 to around $1,200 for a round trip. And from Canada, I know, shout out to all my Canadian friends. I know a lot of you do listen to the podcast, so shout out to you. And also in Japan, thank you so much for listening and making Hawaii's Best one of the top travel podcasts in Japan and in Canada. Really cool. Anyways, okay, from Canada, you're looking at around $700 to $1,100. And international flights will vary. Typically, it's around $1,200 round trip. So those are just like planning ranges. Don't come after me if you found a deal or it's like a lot more. Yes, it does depend on the time of year. Does sometimes depend on the climate of the world, as far as like conflicts or whatever is going on. So you may find a sale, or you may be traveling during Christmas, spring break, or summer, and you may see much higher prices. But remember, the first flight price you may see may not actually be the final cost. You may still have to do, check bags, seat selections, airport parking at home, like, parking your car and then driving to the airport. If you're not able to get someone to drop you off, you got to pay for that parking. That's always, honestly, that's always one of the things that I forget about. Like, everything's planned is like, oh yeah, no one's available to drive us. We have to go pay and park at the airport. And that's, another, sometimes a couple $100 right there. And food, during your travel day, that's also, you call it like airport rules, like pretty much anything goes. Yeah, okay, I'm going to go spend $15 on a spam musubi or whatever. So island hopping, we're talking about flights, adds even more. A second island is not just like a price of a one short flight. You may have to pay to check your bags again, return a rental car, pick up another rental car, pay for airport transportation, and lose part of a vacation day. For a couple, adding another island can easily add several $100s. For a family, it can add more than $1,000. I've seen that. We're just puddle hopping over to Kauai from Oahu, and sometimes that can be, depending on time of year. Like, really, it costs that much just to get over, a 20-minute flight or whatever. But that does add up. So that does not mean you shouldn't, not visit or another island. It just means you should understand what and how it really adds up. But before we move on, this episode is sponsored by Hawaiian Airlines, my personal favorite way to fly to the islands and to fly inter-island is through Hawaiian Airlines. But I don't know, maybe it's just me, but a Hawaii trip starts to feel real the moment I board a Hawaiian Airlines flight. And not necessarily like when I land, but as soon as I board that flight, and after more than 30 trips to the islands, and with every inter-island flight I've taken has been on Hawaiian Airlines, and that feeling for me, my family, still has not changed over the years. There's just something about the welcome, the aloha, and I know a lot of you share that same type of feeling, and the service and the first sense of aloha that makes it feel like the trip has already started. So if Hawaii is on your mind too, like mine, like it always is, Hawaiian Airlines is having a one-day only Hawaii flight sale on July 21st. That's the day this episode gets released. The sale starts at 8 a.m. Pacific and runs through 11:59 p.m. Pacific on July 21st, 2026. you can check the current Hawaii flight deals through the link in the show notes below, because Hawaii is always a good idea and it never hurts to look just to see what your options are and what flights currently look like. Now, let's get to the biggest and most expensive part of the trip. A lot of people don't realize this. Flights get picked on a lot. And yeah, flights are a big cost, but it's actually lodging. Based on a recent 2026 hotel average, Oahu has been around $265 per night. Kauai has been closer to around $400 for 10 to be exact, and Big Island has been around $425. And Maui has been close to about $500 per night. Those are averages. Resort areas, oceanfront rooms, holidays, and premium properties obviously can cost a lot more. The other thing I think people miss is that the advertised nightly rate is not the amount that they may actually pay. So you got to kind of look into that. Let's say you see a hotel listed for about $400 per night. You might think, okay, 7 nights, 4 times 7, $2,800. It's not cheap, but it's manageable. Then you go to check out and now you have a lodging tax that's closer to 19%. Maybe there's a $45 nightly resort fee. Maybe the parking is another $40 to $50 per night. And suddenly that $400 room may actually cost you closer to $525 to $550 per night. And over 7 nights, that difference can add more than $1,000 right there. And this is where I think a lot of people do get surprised. They compare hotels based on the number shown in the search results instead of the final checkout total. So look at those taxes, resort fees, parking, cleaning fees even, service charges, and cancellation terms. And that doesn't necessarily mean that vacation rentals are automatically cheaper either. They can be good value for families, especially if you have a full kitchen, like I mentioned earlier, cooking your meals in. But once you add in, cleaning fee or taxes, parking, minimum stays, the savings may not be as large as you expect. But again, the food is a big thing because for a couple, I would budget around 120 to 170 or so per day if you're trying to keep things simple. That might include groceries, food trucks, casual lunches, and a few nice resort dinners. You want to get that sunset dinner in, right? That first night or that last night. But, for a mix of casual meals or in nicer hotels, I'd probably budget closer to 180 to 260 per day. And if you are eating mostly at resorts or higher end restaurants, you can easily spend about $300 per day. That's for a couple. Now, we can get to a family of 4. A lower budget approach is around $220 to $300 per day. A mixed approach would be around $300 to $450. And a resort-heavy dining experience would be probably around $500 per day. It adds up really fast. You got to do coffee, breakfast, lunch, drinks, snacks, dinner, tax. It really does add up. Don't forget the tip, too. Don't forget, on top of all that, don't forget the tip. That's super important. So as you can see, a kitchen definitely can help if you're able to stay somewhere that has that. And on top of all this, just remember the groceries in Hawaii are not necessarily inexpensive either. It does cost quite a bit more. So as much as you can, support local as you're out. But I understand we do the Costco run as well. That is an option on every island. Every island does have a Costco or 2. All right, I do want to talk a little bit about transportation just as quickly as possible. Oahu is the easiest island to visit without needing to rent a car, only if you're staying in Waikiki. If you're staying out in Ko'olina, West Side area, or if you're up in, North Shore, Turtle Bay, you're going to need to rent a car for that, unless you're just going to Uber out to the West Side and stay there the whole time and then maybe Uber back. You can maybe do that. But in Waikiki, you don't necessarily need a car. Maybe you rent a car for the day, hit up to North Shore or do the things you want to do for the day. That can save you money right there. But the other islands, neighboring islands, Maui, Kauai, Big Island, a rental car is super important. Same thing with flights. Rental car prices can change depending on the time of year, depending on supply and demand. I've gotten cars as cheap as, $50 a day. I think one time we had a $45 per day Corolla. That was pretty cool, just my wife and I. But that can go all the way up to $150 or so a day, depending on the size of the car, if you need a van or something like that. So that can add up pretty quickly. All right, so that's kind of where I'm going to cut today's episode. I don't want to keep giving you numbers. I wanted to give you like the basics, flights, hotels, overall costs of what it looks like to get to the islands and have a great time. Hawaii in 2026, yes, it's expensive. It can be manageable. It can be doable, but just having a full picture of what to know. You can go to hawaiisbesttravel.com/calculator and really play with the numbers. I don't even asking for your email over there or anything like that. Totally free. Go ahead and play with that calculator. I just updated it today. Everything from activities to taxes to the island, how many people are going. So go ahead and that's going to be the easiest way because every Hawaii trip is so individualized and every budget and every goal of what you're hoping to get out of your trip is personal to you and your family, whomever you're traveling with. So again, go ahead and check the link below for current flight deals with Hawaiian Airlines. And also while you're there, go ahead and click on the link to go check out the free Hawaii trip calculator. I hope you find it useful and helpful in your planning your trip to Hawaii. All right, so until next time, as always, live with aloha. Mahalo for listening to Hawaii's Best. If you found today's episode helpful, make sure to hit follow on your podcast app so you don't miss future episodes. You can find all links and resources mentioned today in the show notes below. Hawaii's Best is produced by Shorebreak Media Group, edited by Easy Podcast Solutions, and with music by our friends Stick Figure.